Welcome back to the Neijiaquan podcast. My name is Isaac Kamens. Today we are talking about the godfather of Taiwanese martial arts, Chen Pan Ling. Chen was one of the pivotal figures in the early Chinese martial art development, like in terms of schools and curriculums and things like that. So in the 1920s and 30s, he was a big organizer and teacher and all this stuff in the mainland. And then in the 40s, he moved to Taiwan, and he was kind of the wise old man that all the other guys kind of respected and looked to for guidance, not just in terms of martial arts, but also just as like, how do we do this martial art thing and, make it work. So we talk about Chen and his life, as well as his father's time in the Shaolin Temple. So it's an interesting look into that sort of bygone era as well. Also, we just want to thank everybody for supporting us. It's been almost 5 years, or over 5 years now, so it's been quite a ride. Probably don't say it enough, but we couldn't do it without you guys. So thanks for listening. Take care of yourselves and be well.
Today's episode is another episode about the Chinese martial arts history of Taiwan. We're going to look at Chinese boxing by Robert W. Smith from 1974. In regards to another well-known teacher of the internal martial arts, Chen Pan Ling. So he's someone we've mentioned in a couple episodes previously, just another one of the well-known teachers of that time period after World War II in Taiwan from 1949 on. And he's one of sort of the leaders. He's the most high up politically. So he interacts with the higher level of society. So the other martial arts people have to respect him extra. And he helped pave the way for internal martial arts and, sort of these northern Chinese martial arts that had arrived to be more accepted and organized in Taiwan. So he's got a pretty interesting story. And so Robert Smith says like this: until his death at 77 years old in 1967, Chen Pan Ling was without doubt more knowledgeable on the principles, rationale, and practice of Chinese boxing than anyone in the world. So there you go. I mean, he starts off just laying it out. This guy's the most respected authority on Chinese martial arts, period.
Yeah, he was like the elder statesman, I think. He knew, in some ways, I think he wasn't necessarily the best, but he was kind of like the true scholar of, like,
Right.
you want to know about any martial art, this dude could tell you something about it, right?
Right. He
Like
knows the most.
he was just and we've mentioned this before, but he was the 1936 Guoshu team's coach, right? So what that means is, he was versed in basically the widest breadth of martial arts you could get, because that's was his job essentially. I mean, was to find, the best of all the different styles and to kind of.
Totally. He was one of the few fighters in Taiwan who was famed earlier on the mainland. So shit, I hadn't heard that before. It's not spoken of in his rep that much, but it sounds like he was kind of a badass.
I mean, I'm sure you don't get to be the head of the,
Right?
fighting team if you're
But I
not.
think his fighting's going on in 1905, 1910,
Right.
1915.
It's early.
So
This is early. Like,
he's born 1890. So he's born well in the Qing dynasty, which is so that makes him old. He's 20 years older than Wang Shijing.
yeah. Again, I mean, they were part of the pre-Boxer Rebellion world, and then
Right.
they came out of that.
Right.
We're in the sort of warlord era where things were pretty wild, and martial arts was a big part of that.
Yeah.
Still, because
So if
firearms.
you made your name as a fighter during that time period, that probably counts for something.
Yeah, that meant you were like, I mean, I don't know what if they were competitions or street fights, but either way, yeah, I'm
He was
sure
doing something right.
he was getting into it.
And the next thing it says his father had undergone the severe training at the Shaolin Temple in Honan province and had selected the finest teachers for his son. So he's the actual Shaolin Temple guy, huh?
So his dad,
So
like,
that would be like 1850, 1840, 50
right? I
area.
mean, yeah.
So
Well, and
sounds like it runs in the family.
right. So it sounds like he got the cream of the crop of the instructors too, you know. So
Yeah. He even was able to study Tai Chi at the famed Honan village of Chenjiaguo, which is the homeland of Chen style Tai Chi. So he's
right.
supposedly incorporated that into his Tai Chi as well. So that was kind of one of his claims to fame. Like nobody else had been to Chen Village that in especially in that time period of let's say 1920s, 30s. Like a few people had gone later, but when this book came out, that was
Right.
pretty unheard of to have
Well,
been to Chen Village,
I
period.
mean, I think he's like of a contemporary mind of like Sun Ludong, right? They were part of that. Let's make internal martial arts, right? Let's
Yeah.
make. But I think Chen Pan Ling was even more like because he was also involved in the curriculum of how to organize, okay, what's an internal martial art? What's an external martial art? Where do the weapons forms fit into the whole thing? When they were setting up the Guoshuguan schools, right? So I think part of that is just kind of again, if you come from that, again, when they say Shaolin, I think what that really means is you're learning dozens of, different martial arts that are sort of all kind of done in a similar manner, but there are lots of different forms, different styles, different, techniques and all this stuff. Again, it's kind of lumped into that. And then, you go and you learn your internal ones. And so these guys were all about trying to make one martial art or, some sort of grand martial art. Same with like Ichman, same thing, right? Like
Hmm.
tried to make this sort of synthesis of Xingyi,
Yep.
Tai Chi, and
Very common throughout history
yeah,
to
like
synthesize.
it was just a thing at the time, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that was that movement for sure. So it says that Chen Pan Ling rose so high in boxing ranks that he supervised several of the provincial fistic tournaments before World War II in Hunan, one of the prime boxing provinces on the mainland.
So he's judging the fights, I
So
guess.
at that point, here in the 40s, he's judging the fights and organizing the competition.
Yeah.
It says during World War II, he was made deputy chief of the Central Boxing Association in Chongqing, where he also headed a commission to collect, edit, and publish material on 55 forms of wushu.
Jeez.
Unfortunately, most of the material was lost when the communists took over the mainland. So
Bummer.
they had 55 style series in the works.
That's pretty impressive.
That's pretty sad it got taken out, though. Dang. Who knows? Maybe it's in some old filing cabinet somewhere.
Well, I think remember that thing from Hong Kong 1980 thing you sent me?
Oh, yeah, there's some old.
I think those things are sort of remnants of it, like
I mean, the whole wushu movement definitely was started
bits,
by this.
right,
It's the,
bits
the
and pieces
style of
of it,
illustration and
Yeah, yeah.
description. Yeah. Yeah, it makes
Yeah,
sense.
I think a lot of the original material probably got lost. Printed stuff, at least. I mean,
So then Robert Smith gives his sort of personal feeling of his experience with Chen Pan Ling. He says, when I knew him, Chen was president of a college in Taichung and a highly respected head of the Chinese Boxing Association in Taiwan. In his twilight years, he had lost some of his youthful ability. But still, watching him go through his synthetic boxing, one knew here that he was one of a better breed, a champion fighter. He told me once that he had practiced staff work under a famed 90-year-old master in Beijing. During a go at conclusions, young Chen was able to not only deflect the stick of the master, but in the save movement caused the oldster to lose his weapon. Many students laughed at this. The master repossessed the weapon and told the class not to laugh. This was not an occasion for laughter. This was serious. Why do you laugh? He said. That was a splendid movement showing that young Chen has achieved a breakthrough in technique. No real teacher begrudges a point scored by a student. It only reflects well on this teacher. Rather than laugh, the rest of you get to work. Now all of you leave except Chen. So that's just some anecdote that he
right.
told him,
But that's a common thing that happens is
right?
the people not having the technique on them kind of giggle and ha ha ha. But it's
Yeah, everyone nervously laughs when you do
like
that.
you laughing
The
now,
teacher usually bursts out and
yeah,
slams you.
somebody's getting punished.
Right. I mean, luckily the guy's 90 years old, so at that point he's finally mature enough to say, "Oh, good job, student," instead of
Yeah.
whipping his ass like you would have
Well,
in the
and
previous 70 years or
yeah,
whatever.
I think that a lot of these guys, as they got older, they sort of shifted more to weapons because it gave them
Hmm.
a little bit of an advantage, you know.
Hmm.
Like,
Technique versus technique rather than brute force makes sense.
and distance, right? You get some
And some space from these young
some
speedsters.
fucking brutes.
So yeah, I think it's just a morality story of Chinese martial arts where you want your
Right.
students
Of
to
course, yeah.
thrive.
Take it seriously, don't joke around. I mean, that's a pretty common, it's a good lesson to learn if you want to
So
do
Robert
that.
Smith went to speak to this guy, General Yang, who was a close association of Chen. So he must have been a general in the Kuomintang army.
Mhm.
He told me that as a student, this guy was a close associate of Chen Pan Ling. He said, as a student, Chen did not follow the rules of protocol. He refused to kowtow and was regarded as a radical on this account.
Mm.
This carried over to his teachings. He charged no one, nor did he insist on ritual, but he was selective in whom he taught. So that's some interesting. He even in the before the in that Boxer Rebellion era, he was already against the whole disciple lineage system. He
Right.
wanted to. It sounds like he was one of those modernizer type of guys, like we were saying.
Well, I mean, I think that was one of the things they realized that was really holding the growth of martial arts back was this culture of keeping everything secret.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
And
that's
like,
true.
I mean, it's one of the reasons why I think Japanese martial arts came to the West a lot sooner than Chinese martial arts because they didn't have quite the same level of like trying to keep everything secret, and so like you know, it just took longer for the Chinese to open up to the idea of like, hey, maybe if we don't keep everything secret, we could actually
Yeah,
survive, you know?
right. There was a definite modernizing trend all throughout the 20th century of, for better or worse, of like, hey, let's change the old ways and try to keep up
Yeah, well,
militarily.
keeping things secret it has advantages, but it also keeps things small. If you want to get big, you got to advertise. You got to be out there doing stuff to kind of show off and you don't just keep it to like five family members and hope that they have kids to pass it on to, right? You actually got to teach strangers and have organized schools and things like that, which
Takes
is
a lot of organizing, yeah.
that was I mean, see, I think we kind of take it for granted now because we all just kind of have the image of like, Karate USA or, your average, whatever, BJJ kind of like chain school
Sure.
but that's a new thing in terms of
A modernization. Yeah. Chen
that
Pan
did,
Ling's one of the
right.
forces that caused this to happen, right?
Well, and I think Hung Shang is really one
Mm.
of I mean, in terms of
Chen
the
Pan Ling's student, Hung Yishang, he,
in the modern, age, if you will, like to kind of say, okay, like we gotta get rid of some of this traditional, like uptight kind of
right. Superstitious
cloak.
nonsense holding us back
Yeah, it's
from.
just all this cloak and dagger shit. They keep everything kind of hidden under the robes, and you gotta like, do all these rituals to get into, and it's like, no, 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 just pay the money and you can come train. And, it's like, it's just, it's a different way of looking at it.
So talking about this student of Chen Pan Ling's, he has a few ideas that Smith passed on. He says, this guy, General Young, he's speaking of the teachings of Chen Pan Ling pretty much. He said that chi can be translated energy and is quite important. The proofs for it, however, are subjective.
Mm.
Everyone is born with it, but unless it is cultivated, it is lost. The tiger's mouth, the space between the stretched thumb and index finger used in Xingyi and Bagua, permits the qi to come to the top of the index finger. If the digits are not stretched, the qi cannot get across. So in 1960, whatever, when Smith was putting this out, there was a lot of interest in what qi is. And so here's one of those Xingyi and Bagua really does emphasize that space between the index and the
Well, and that,
thumb becoming
right, and
really
that's kind
strong.
of a difference between Xingyi and Bagua versus Tai Chi, because Tai
Mm,
Chi is more about relaxing the palm and letting things go out to the fingertip rather than stretching it and opening it.
right.
So. I
Where
think
Xing
that's
Yi and Bagua are both pretty open about you
yeah, I
you
think that's
you
one
do
that's
stuff with it, but you start off stretching the shit
I mean
out of
that's
it to get
one
it
of the
strong.
things about the Chen Pan Ling form that I noticed right off the bat is that the way the palm is held a lot of times is
Hmm.
a little bit closer to the way it's held in Xingyi styles,
Makes sense.
and so there's a yeah. Anyways, but there's little things like that. It's just the way certain movements are done have a certain flavor, and I think that was
That's a signature of Xing Yi and Bagua is that
yeah, that was
strong grip between the tiger's mouth.
because if you are gonna take something from Xingyi and Bagua and put it in Tai Chi, that's probably the best thing to take is that ability to just hold your arm out and keep it there and have some strength in your hand. Because if you can do that, relaxing that strength is not that difficult. But if you don't have the strength to begin with, you don't have anything to really relax. You're just
Yep.
going to collapse.
Oh, and here's another cool story. He says that General Yang had met Du Xingwu back on
Mm,
the mainland, one of the greatest
The,
boxers of all time.
yeah, the natural boxing founder.
So he's the founder of natural boxing who taught Liu Hengjie and his buddy Wan Lai
Wang
Sheng.
Sheng. Actually, the guy they learned from was named Yang also. He was a student of Du's, but it was one of those situations where Du was quite old, and so they mostly learned from his student.
Interesting.
Um,
Well, it sounds like this guy Yang had only just met him, so he's
no,
probably not the same Yang.
there's probably a lot of guys named Yang. But
So he describes Du Xingwu as about 6 feet tall, very thin. He gave no hint of being a boxer. However, he could turn his head 180 degrees and do marvelous things quite beyond even the most skilled of the rest of us. He wore a queue. He wore his hair in a queue, and when it dangled in front of his eyes in doing a form, he would take his foot as though it were his hand and move the queue out of the way.
hmm, interesting.
What?
Because Wang Sheng was really flexible too. He could pick his foot
Hey,
up
that's
over his
true,
head. He was in
huh?
his 90s. But wasn't Du Xingwu's teacher a dwarf?
Du Xingwu's teacher was the dwarf.
That's
Yeah.
wild. So he's 6 feet tall and he learned from a dwarf. Like
His
that's
teacher was this
yeah.
super short dude. So yeah, I
Well,
think
I'm wondering. I'm
Did Du
wondering if
Xing
the guy
Dumu write any books?
was the guy actually a dwarf, or was Du Xingwu just like everybody was a
Normal.
dwarf because he was so tall?
So wait,
No, I
there's a
don't think
couple
so.
books about natural boxing. Those are by Wang Laishen.
Those are mostly, I think, by Wang
And
Lingsheng.
he's a young protege. He's teaching all
Oh
kinds of
yeah,
stuff at a young age. And so maybe this guy, Du Xingwu, I mean, it calls him one of the greatest boxers of all time. So he must have been
he
pretty big
was.
deal.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard
Sounds like he comes after Dong Aichuan and them.
right.
So he's more of a newer god of martial arts, but maybe one of the last of the most legendary Cheng Tinghua type of guys.
Well, and he's almost like a Deng Haichuan figure in that
It just comes later.
just yeah, but just comes sort of poof out of nowhere with this martial art that that sort of badass.
Rock the world,
Yeah,
yeah.
so kind of like whoa, where did that come from?
Yeah, that's another whole interesting topic. I think at some point we'll have a couple episodes go back over Zeron Men, and even though I've never trained it, it's an interesting fourth internal martial art or whatever. All
Yeah,
right, so to go back to Chen Pan Ling, um, his advice to me was always terse and profound. He said that the internal aspects of mind, chi, and strength must be attuned to the external, eye, hand, and foot, if boxing is to come to full flower. But in anything less than complete coordination, it is better to rely on the internal. So that sounds like he's talking about the six harmonies, right? Of
yeah.
three internal harmonies and three external harmonies. In this case, the mind connects to the eyes, the chi connects to the hands, the strength connects to the foot. You know, people have
Yeah, I
different,
mean, people have different kind of
sometimes you can describe those in different ways, but suffice to say, you connect the inside and the outside thoroughly, I think is the overall idea.
yeah.
It says, but it's best to rely on the internal. So there's advice. He says
Right.
Bagua and Xing Yi must be practiced with the same relaxedness as Tai Chi, but at normal boxing speed. There is no greater mistake than to practice them forcefully like karate.
Mm.
So when you put it like that, I agree. I think you've got to keep that internal lack of tension and stiffness that Tai Chi has. They're not as soft, but they do could have that same idea of not being stiff, not being tense.
Well,
So,
I think there's levels of it, right? There's like being physically strong but relaxing, your mind not being tense
yeah,
internally, like, sort of
right.
this
So it doesn't
idea.
look nearly as soft as Tai Chi and it's moving at normal speed, but
But
it,
your mind isn't like you're not scared or angry or, your mind is clear. Let's just, you're able to see what's happening in front of you and there aren't these giant gaps in your awareness, right?
well, and like he says, forcefully like karate, I think that makes me think of like ki-eyeing real hard and
Right.
lunging and sort of even Xing Yi, you keep a smooth rhythm going. You never just stop. You might do Fa Jing for a second and keep going, but that's not that stop and start sort of forceful effect. I don't know.
Right.
So
But
that
but it's like you always say, you have to have the physical strength the same physical strength that you would do to do an external martial art to do an internal martial art. You just don't
right,
you just don't need to rely on that as the main thing, right? So, you still got to be able to stand on one leg and, put your
right.
arms over your head and stretch out and, do
Got
all
to do
that
all the
stuff.
extra internal stuff that
But
take
but
even more of your day.
right, but I mean the classic one is, so when you throw a punch at the end of the punch, you relax your shoulder, right? Instead of tensing up and clenching your jaw or whatever, right?
Well, and there you go. The end of the paragraph says, the body must act and react as a single entity. No component acts independently, and it must be kept open and not contracted. Otherwise, some components, for example, the shoulders, will act to the detriment of the whole, and the action will lose trueness and suffer appreciably.
Yeah, I mean, your whole body can be relaxed, your punch can be perfect, but if your shoulder's all tensed up, all that force is just going to go right into your neck, right? So, I think this is where the you can do it in internal martial arts, but it's less the focus, where it's kind of the focus of things like Northern Shaolin, where you're essentially just learning, like he said, was it Lee, right? The strength part of this thing,
Mm,
that's learning how to just be physically fit would be the way we would say. You're not like a superhero or anything. You're just in good health. You're strong. You're a healthy young person, right? And then there's this sort of like you can take that and kind of build off it, right? But you're not trying to only have that. He's like he says, that's great, but internal, is better, right? Like
right.
the
You had to choose between the two.
there isn't a you have both at your disposal. You can
Right,
choose which one to use, right? If you only
right.
have one, you don't get that choice,
Yep.
right?
That's
And
the bottom line. More
that's I
options is
mean,
better.
that's my like the whole why do internal martial arts instead of just external martial arts if all you care about is fighting? Because internal martial arts gives you more options. It gives you all the options you have of external martial arts, but it also gives you a couple other ones, right? And it's just that, thing of the more options you have at your disposal in terms of ways you can approach a situation, the better your chances of, succeeding in that situation, right? Where if you only have one or two options and it's like if your only thing is, okay, I gotta punch this dude as hard as I can, take him to the ground and just start, fucking turning him into hamburger
Right.
meat. You're
Every solution is a hammer if all you have is a
Right.
nail. But
And then what ends up happening, real life, you're a criminal very quickly, right? Like it's not people don't their
yeah, different
consequences,
tools for different
right?
situations. That's an internal teaching right there,
One of
big
one
time.
of the things Bruce always emphasized was he referred to it as going to war, right? That you don't have to go to war every time something happens, right? That
Right.
your mindset doesn't have to be destroy the other person to oblivion every time something scares you, right? And so one of the things you learn in life and but internal martial arts focuses on it is see what the situation is from more than one angle, right? And you can only really get that when you can overcome that sort of rah, that just sort of kill or be killed kind of mindset, which is, that's what our biology kind of tells us what to do. But the internal martial arts is about overcoming that biology and having something that's a little more intelligent.
So the next thing he talks about is his father's stories from the Shaolin Temple.
Mm.
So it says students there usually practice 3 times a day, 2 hours at a time. In the morning, lunch, and evening. For advanced students, there was also a special practice at midnight.
Damn.
Initially, students underwent group instruction, but after reaching a certain level, they were taught individually. After a student had completed his studies, he had to pass through 4 or 5 gates at which his masters attacked him.
Ah,
If he was successful in thwarting these attempts, the student was permitted to leave the temple as a graduate.
wow.
So he had to go through the tests.
That's wild.
So then you later get all these movies of like having to
Right.
fight your way through the traps and the tricks
Right.
and the different hot coals and all the variety
Right.
of
Right.
spikes and stuff. But it sounds like it was mostly just you had to spar your teachers on the way out, and they had to, all right, it's looking good. I think we can let them loose.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's
A little more realistic,
they got to put you through a little bit of a hazing process.
right? That's how it
They're
should be.
probably not trying to like break you.
Right, but you got to feel tested, and if you're gonna be a product of
I
the
mean, it's like
organization, it's
that's a common thing in like karate
all martial
black
arts.
belts,
Yeah,
right? To get your black belt, you got to fight a black belt or something,
yeah, or a whole bunch of them, one
or
after
a whole
another,
bunch,
for like 1 minute each, and
right?
so
So
you
there's
get
a
a
some.
testing.
I mean, the one that goes way back was the if you were an enlisted man, you were learning one martial art, and there was a
Hmm.
better one for the officers. And to get to the officers, you had to beat an officer. Kind of So to become a higher level, you had to beat with a inferior
Right,
technology. You had to beat someone with a
right. To
superior
take their
technology.
spot, basically.
Basically, exactly. You take their spot,
There's only
and
so many jobs at that echelon, so you got
exactly.
to
But
knock one
that's
guy
but that's
out.
how they, that's I mean, I wish there was some of that in politics, but that's how they kept it fresh, right? That's how you keep it from getting just being a bunch of old guys who can't, walk as your army, right? It's like, you want the guys who are still full of piss and vinegar in charge.
So he says, I worked closely with Chen Pan Ling on organizational matters of the Chinese Boxing Association. During his waning years, he published his own gathered materials of Tai Chi, as also a book on Shuaijiao. I
Hmm.
feel sure that there are many writings of his unpublished, for once he spoke of a schedule involving all of the major arts. I recall this because I had urged him to put out a general work covering all the arts prior to one on specific methods. He sensed my seriousness and treated me with more respect than I deserved.
Now, is that the book you think Wang Shujing was talking about, or
Yeah, the Tai
Wang
Chi
Fu,
book.
Wang Fu Lai was talking about?
Yeah, he put out the combined methods of Tai Chi book. That was his main publication. It sounds like it's also a Shuaijiao book. But I have his Xingyi and Bagua books as well. So those did come out, but maybe they were after Robert Smith left. It sounds like they were
Oh,
probably published in the
yeah.
60s. All right, so the final paragraph. Chen Ling's last years were spent in a depressed state. His good name besmirched in one of life's episodes in which nothing one does avails.
Oh
He
no.
nonetheless was most kind to me. I was only able to appreciate it much later when I too encountered such an episode.
Uh-oh.
I met him several times in Taipei, and each time I went to Taichung, he greeted me anew, bidding his disciples to accommodate me fully. His 2 sons, Yun Chao and Yun Qing, are in an unenviable position of carrying his name and fighting tradition forward. But what a glorious thing, too, to have had such a father.
Hmm. Nice.
So there you have it.
This guy sounds like an interesting character, this young
Yeah, I mean,
fella.
he was highly respected, but that's sort of in the mists of time, how that reputation was earned. It seems like there's a lot more to his life story that
And
I'll
what
bet
was
they could do a Blurred Boundaries type of book about him. I wish somebody had done
well,
that.
and what I wonder what the episode was all about.
The besmirching, yeah.
The besmirching. I wonder if
And
that
plus, think of all the politics of the Kuomintang versus the CCP all
Right.
through the 30s and 40s, the backstabbing, the betrayals, the
massacres. Well, I
massacres,
wonder, but say,
the purges, you know.
I wonder
Oh,
if some of that had to do with the um, the being credited with the Tai Chi form and how much, people may have tried to take that
that
credit.
may have been
I mean,
controversial.
yeah, but his influence is really powerful. I mean, I think he's one of these guys who doesn't get enough credit for really just being, a staunch supporter of martial arts for his entire life, essentially.
Yeah, he's a big
He's
promoter. And
which was
again, a lot of the things he
maybe fears.
started continue to today. The
Yeah,
publishing, the
yeah,
simplifying and gathering, the tournaments and meetups, like the
yeah.
breaking
Yeah.
of the disciple system.
And
That
just
still
that,
goes on, obviously. There's
right? I
nothing
mean,
wrong with it. It's just that's not the norm anymore. He
right.
went from when that
That was
was he made it the norm what we have now, kind of.
right. This idea of, anybody can learn martial arts, not just kids of martial artists.
All right. Well, it sounds
Anyway,
like that'll do for now.
that'll do for now. All right, man. Talk to you soon.
Yep.
Hey guys, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Just a quick plug for the Patreon episode. This week it's going to be a look at the White Cloud Temple in Beijing. And Jess was there last year, just maybe the year before. Time is meaningless these days. Anyway, so he talks about his trip there, and we give a little bit of history of the temple, which will then kind of dovetail into a series on two of the things that Jess saw when he was there, which are these the Neijing 2 and the Zhuzhen 2, which are two sort of maps of how Neigong Neidan works. So we're going to talk about those for a couple episodes. All right, thanks again for listening. Take care of yourselves and be well.